Democrats, they have to simultaneously claim that their weaponization of the institutions isn't happening and that when it is happening, it is good. It's not happening and it's good. So when it comes to, for example, the FBI, the claim is that it's never been weaponized. The DOJ has never been weaponized. So Representative Jamie Raskin, who took the lead in the impeachment trials of Donald Trump in the House, he says he has no proof that the FBI or DOJ were ever weaponized at any point, under any circumstances. How weird.
I haven't seen what the proof is that the FBI has been weaponized against a political party or the Department of Justice. Of course, this Department of Justice has brought charges against a Democratic U.S. Senator in New Jersey, a Democratic congressman in Texas. And so some people just seem to think that it should go only in one direction. And if it doesn't, then somehow it's politicized. And I think that's what they mean when they talk about politicization in the deep state.
No, what they're talking about is the DOJ being weaponized against Donald Trump while trying to cut sweetheart deals with Hunter Biden, only to be thwarted, and then Joe Biden pardons Hunter. Or maybe what they mean is the FBI being utilized in order to get surveillance warrants against members of the Trump campaign, and then leaders of the FBI working along with the media in order to leak false documentation from Hillary Clinton into public view. Maybe that would be the thing. Maybe it's that. Speaking of which, former FBI Deputy Director Andrew McCabe is very upset about Kash Patel. He suggests that Trump is planning to dismantle the FBI.
What does this signal in terms of Donald Trump's intent for the FBI? The installation, or the nomination, I guess we should say at this point, of Kash Patel as FBI director can only possibly be a plan to disrupt, to dismantle, to distract the FBI, and to possibly use it as a tool for the president's political agenda.
Now, again, listening to Andrew McCabe talk about politicization as though he was not involved is insane. You'll remember that he was actually fired originally back in March of 2018 because he allegedly had been leaking information from the FBI to the Wall Street Journal in an attempt to demonstrate the FBI had actually been going after Hillary Clinton. And then he was dishonest about it. He lost his pension temporarily and all the rest. These are the people who are at the FBI. Meanwhile, the panel at MSNBC, which is perfectly happy with weaponization of the executive branch, so long as it's against a Republican, is very upset about this.
Kash Patel as FBI director would be like if you crossed Alex Jones with J. Edgar Hoover in terms of just how much he would want to ignore precedent and the constraints that have been put onto the FBI over the years. With all of the conspiracy theorizing, all of the eagerness to fan the flames of the worst instincts of President Trump put into power, those two things should never mix. Kash Patel has them both, and he is a couple of votes away from that happening once he's put before the Senate.
Again, all these folks care about is weaponization of the government on their own behalf. But the reality is that one of the chief missions of the new Trump administration is going to be to defenestrate all of those who would be involved in the left-wing politicization of these departments. This is why, for example, the head of the NIH is now presumably going to be Jay Bhattacharya. As the New York Times points out, the National Institutes of Health, the world's leading public funder of biomedical research, has an enviable track record. No surprise the agency has been called the crown jewel of the federal government. But come January, when President-elect Trump and congressional Republicans take charge, the NIH may face a reckoning. Well, yeah, because it deserves a reckoning. Have you seen some of the idiotic studies funded by the NIH? They spend literally billions of dollars on absolute sheer nonsense gobbledygook that has nothing to do with actual science. Bhattacharya has called for dramatic restructuring for the NIH. He says it's led by small-minded bureaucrats, which is true. According to the New York Times, many fear the next administration will nonetheless weaken the NIH, divesting from critical research with long-lasting consequences for science, innovation, and public health. But that, of course, is nonsense. Jay Bhattacharya is a well-known researcher from Stanford University. He's not intending on preventing them from doing research. He wants them to be able to duplicate research, for example. They also want to be able to fund studies that aren't necessarily politically correct. He says he wants to restructure the agency, says Bhattacharya, so the power is decentralized from, quote, a small number of scientific bureaucrats. He is correct about all of that. It's more on this in just a moment. First, you know what's as risky as going 80 in a 65 zone using the internet without ExpressVPN. Most of the time, nothing bad will happen. All it takes is one bad actor to completely compromise your data. Here's a fact. Every time you connect to an unencrypted network, cafes, hotels, airports, you're essentially putting out a welcome mat for hackers to access your personal data. Folks, it doesn't take some genius leftist tech programmer to hack you. Even a 12-year-old with cheap hardware could do it. Your data is valuable. Hackers can make up to $1,000 per person selling personal information on the dark web. That's precisely why I use ExpressVPN. It creates a secure encrypted tunnel between your device and the internet. Hackers can't steal your sensitive data because, and this is actually incredible, it would take them over 1 billion years to crack ExpressVPN's encryption. They'll be dead by then. No one lives that long. Even if they had a supercomputer. Well, it's incredibly easy to use ExpressVPN. You just open that app, you click one button, and you're now protected. It works on all your devices, phones, laptops, tablets, whatever you need. Look, I'm constantly traveling for speaking engagements, interviews. I can't afford to have my personal information compromised because I needed to use airport Wi-Fi. With ExpressVPN, I stay secure on the go no matter where I am. Right now, you can take advantage of ExpressVPN's Black Friday, Cyber Monday offer and get the absolute best VPN deal you'll find all year long. Scan that QR code on screen, click the link in the description, or visit expressvpn.com/Ben Shapiro Show. By visiting my special link, you get 4 extra months with the 12-month plan or 6 extra months with the 24-month plan absolutely free. Again, that's expressvpn.com/Ben Shapiro Show. The people who are victimized by these institutions are now going to be the people who are in charge of these institutions. And that needs to happen because the thoroughgoing corruption of institutions, both in the government and sort of at the gunpoint of government, that's very real. So Mark Andreessen, who of course is a billionaire venture capitalist from Silicon Valley, he was on Joe Rogan last week. He did a pretty stunning episode with Joe Rogan talking about the phenomenon of what is called debanking. This would be people who are on the right predominantly, who are cut off from the banking and financial system for political reasons, largely because of pressure from government. Here he was describing the phenomenon.
So debanking is when you as either a person or your company are literally kicked out of the banking system.
Like they did to Kanye.
Exactly, like they did to Kanye. My partner Ben's father has been debanked.
Really?
We had an employee who
for what?
For having the wrong politics, for saying unacceptable things. Under current banking regulations, here's a great thing. Under current banking regulations, after all the reforms of the last 20 years, there's now a category called a politically exposed person, PEP. And if you are a PEP, you are required by financial regulators to kick them off of your to kick them out of your bank.
What?
You're not allowed to have
what if you're politically on the left?
Well, that's fine.
No.
because they're not politically exposed.
So no one on the left gets debanked?
I have not heard of a single instance of anybody on the left getting debanked.
Can you tell me what the person that you know did, what they said that got them debanked?
Oh, well, I mean, David Horowitz is a right-wing, he's pro-Trump. I mean, he's said all kinds of things. He's been very anti-Islamic terrorism. He's been very worried about migration, all these things.
And they debanked him for that?
Yeah, they debanked it. So you get kicked out of your bank account. You get kicked out of you can't do credit card transactions. By the way, you can't
How is that legal?
Well, exactly. So this is the thing. And then you go into this thing of like, well, this is where the government and the companies get intertwined. Back to your fascism point, which is there's a constitutional amendment that says the government can't restrict your speech, but there's no constitutional amendment that says the government can't debank you, right? And so if they can't do the one thing, they do the other thing, and then they don't have to debank you. They just have to put pressure on the private company banks to do it, and then the private company banks do it because they're expected to. But the government gets to say, we didn't do it. It was the private company that did it. And of course, JP Morgan can decide who they want to have as customers, of course, right? Because they're a private company. And so it's this sleight of hand that happens.
He's totally right about this. I've spoken about this repeatedly myself. I testified before Congress about the sort of soft pressure from Democrats on social media that push social media to work with organizations that are now disbanded, like GARM, which was a consortium of advertisers who got together and decided that they just were going to boycott basically anything that was on the right. Only public exposure forced GARM to essentially disband. The same thing is happening in the banking industry. This is happening in social media. I mean, there was a Supreme Court case a little bit earlier this year in which the Supreme Court wrongly found, in my opinion, a 6-3 majority wrongly found that people who sued the federal government for putting pressure on Facebook to take down their posts didn't have standing. That's ridiculous. But it's these sorts of problems that Trump world is there to fix. Trump world is going to have to be very creative about how they go about all of this. But if you're wondering why precisely Donald Trump is putting all these disruptors in positions of power, the answer is because the system is entirely corrupt. Now, again, these people, I think that they're going to have to be very meticulous in how they go about depoliticking these institutions. The best way to do it, as Kash Patel himself suggests right there, is to shrink them dramatically. It turns out that with enormous power, with huge staffing, with literally 2 million people in the executive branch, it's very easy to exert the levers of pressure against people that you don't like from inside the government and using the government as a pressure tool against private industry and get private industry to do your dirty work the way that Mark Andreessen is talking about right there. The best way to do this would be to shrink government. This is one of the reasons why, more than even cutting government spending, what I think the Department of Government Efficiency under Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy really needs to focus on, it's less about cuts than it is about cutting the staffing. It's about shrinking the mandate of these particular branches of the government that are totally unanswerable. Are you tired of the lies and the twists of the mainstream media talking points? Yeah, me too. Join me in my newest series, Fact, where I dismantle and bring truth to this tiring mainstream agenda.